This is MainStreet with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you, your humble host. We have a full show today. Now, we're doing a two-part show. Today is part one, and we will be recording in a little while part two. And I hope you're going to enjoy this. This program is with my very good friend, Lisa Zarcone, and it's going to be mostly about today abuse, mental health, the signs to look for. We're also going to be talking about the fact that she's an abuse survivor. She's also an author. Her book is called The Unspoken Truth, a Memoir, a child and mental health advocate. She's also a keynote speaker, a social media influencer. I didn't know that. And a radio personality. She's also a national ambassador for NASCA, the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, as well as a court-appointed special advocate for children of child abuse. She is one of the great ladies that I've known in my life, and I had to have her on. And we're doing this in two parts because there is so much to cover between child abuse, mental illness, which is one causes the other, as well as suicide, what we can do to help prevent it, the signs you're going to be looking for, not only in this show, we'll talk about it, but in the next show as well. So I'm excited about that. You can get a hold of her at Lisa Zarcone, ZACONE.net. And, and all the information about her is going to be there. Let me just go over some small statistics real quick. 1 in 7 children experience abuse or neglect as children. And that might also be a much higher statistic. 1 in 4 children, according to another study, are abused by or neglected by throughout their childhood. And the types of abuse are physical, neglect, sexual, 18% physical, 78% neglect, and only 9% are sexual. And there's also emotional abuse. Let me also get to this too, because I think this is important. This is mental illness. 1 in 3 aged 18 to 25-year-old adults, 1 in 3 are exposed to mental illness. 1 in 10 experience serious mental illness. 3.8 million had serious thoughts of suicide. And 1 in 5 young people said that the pandemic had serious, significant effects, negative effects on their well-being. So you have an idea of what's ahead of us. And of course, again, this is part one. We're going to be doing part two before too long, and you'll see that one. So would you please welcome to the program my dear friend, Lisa Zarcone.
Hello, Gary. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay after I just gave that dry stuff. I mean, although it is shocking when you think about it. And of course, we're going to be talking about your life with your book, which is The Unspoken Truth, a memoir about your childhood being abused, not only by your mom, but by just the presence, the environment in which you grew up, in which your dad didn't know how to handle it, your family didn't know how to handle it, and you certainly didn't understand what was going on, except you were being abused. You did know. But there was no place to go back in those days, was there, for anybody?
No, that was in the time back in the 70s. And of course, everything remained, silent. So yes,
Yeah.
it was definitely a hard time. And many people out there, have walked the same type of path as I have, at that time frame when we all remained silent throughout the whole time.
How did you deal with it? I mean, did you, from your book, how did you deal with the abuse? I mean, did you go into a shell? Did you retreat from life?
Well, it's interesting that that you asked that question, and it's such a great question because people respond to abuse in so many different ways. So for myself, the abuse started very young, and when you talk about like my story and how things happen, you have a family, mom, dad, my brother, myself, and my mother struggled with mental illness. So as a very young age, we were being abused emotionally, and of course, my brother was older than I, and he was my protector, and he would shield me from a lot of that. It was interesting as young kids, we really knew something was wrong. We felt it. We witnessed it. We, we're going through it, but we didn't quite know what it was, but we knew that it wasn't normal. And when my brother passed away at the age of 9 and I was 6 years old, I lost my best friend. I lost my protector. And that just, blew up the household. Of course, like my mom could never handle the fact of losing her own child. And,
Yeah.
my father couldn't handle the fact that he lost his son. And he always said that he lost my mom the same day. So our whole family fell apart. So that left me in a very unknown space. And I did tap into different things as I grew up to try to help myself. I went out into nature. I used to write. I would, take my dog. I would do all those things to, protect myself, protect my mind. And kids naturally find these ways of doing things to shield themselves a little bit. And I did do everything I could, honestly, not to be in the home as often as possible. As a young kid, I was always outside, just trying to step away from, the abuse as much as I could. But, it was a long, hard road, and it went on for many years. And of course, because of my mom's mental instabilities, she brought many unsafe people into our home, and I was preyed upon. And it turned out that there was another abuser in the mix there, and I was sexually abused. And that was another scenario that went on for a period of time before it finally ended. And I just went through so many things from such a young age on up into my teenage years. And it was very difficult. And I did struggle tremendously along the way. And
Yeah.
it's amazing what children and young adults go through as they're walking that path.
Didn't other people, friends, neighbors, school teachers, etc., didn't anybody notice anything was wrong here?
Yes, many people noticed things were wrong. So we can start with our own family, my own family unit. Nobody stepped up or stepped in because they felt it was protocol. My dad was the one who was supposed to take care of the family. And if he wasn't doing it, nobody stepped up to help or change anything. So it was very difficult to know that your family members knew what was happening, but there was very little support or help. And our neighbors saw many things. School saw many things. My doctor, everyone knew. My mom was very boisterous and bizarre in her behaviors because of her mental illness was so deep, and she would ride the roller coaster of taking medication, not taking medication.
Yeah.
So she would cycle continually. So everyone noticed. Did anyone ever ask the questions? No. Did anyone step up and say, is this child okay? No. That's the truth. And that was the time frame that, again, back in the 70s, nobody asked the questions. What happened in the home stayed in the home. And honestly, that's what I was told as a kid. Whatever happens here, you never speak of it. You walk out that door, you put your game face on, you do what you have to do and take care of business. So
yeah,
very isolating.
My father always used to have a saying, and so did my mother. And of course, I was born in the 50s, but um, the problem with the kids growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and my brother, who was a school teacher in Dade County, Florida, he used to say, the problem is that we have children having children. They have no clue what to do, how to raise children. Of course, nobody's ever given a handbooklet on how to raise a child to begin with. But if
Right.
you're also dealing with mental illness and abuse is part of the household, a lot of times people look the other way. They don't want to get involved. Oh, that's not my problem. I don't want to get involved. And if you call the police, half the time they don't do much of anything at all either. I
No,
mean,
no, you're right.
and it's
And back in
and
that
it's
time frame, again, even when police could be called in those situations, it was a thing that was handled within the household, within the family unit. That was the way of the world back then. And now it's very different. And we have stepped forward in so many positive ways to help, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still a lot of silence. And earlier you talked about statistics. Now those
Mhm.
are statistics, but those aren't true numbers because so many children and young adults never report their abuse, especially sexual abuse. And then when you break it down into boys and girls will speak before a boy will, especially when it comes to sexual abuse. That's such a hard taboo subject to talk about. So the numbers give us a guideline, but the numbers definitely are much higher.
Yeah. We're talking to Lisa Saccone. She's the author of The Unspoken Truth. a memoir about her life being abused as a child. Now, I don't believe, Tommy, put that picture of the book up with Lisa, that beautiful picture of Miss Lisa. I'm so jealous of your husband. It's insane. There you go.
You're
You can
funny.
pick that. You can go to what any bookstore and order it. I believe. Can you not? You can go online and order the book too,
You
right?
can go online and Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you go into Barnes and Noble, they'll order the book for you and have it delivered to the store.
Yeah.
And other bookstores may be able to pick it up and get it for you. Absolutely. I send everyone to my website, lisazarcone.net. I have my links there. You can find all of my information, and
Yep.
you can learn more about who I am and what I do.
Yeah, and believe me, this lady, to try to get her to come on the show. Once I did eventually get a hold of her, was very difficult because not only does she have a husband, but she has children. She has a very active life, helping children of abuse, mental illness. She's a childhood activist in the courts for children who have been abused. You talked about your mom, and the best way I best describe it is because when I looked back in my notes from when you were on my late night show, was that one minute your mom was there, the next minute your mom wasn't there. Was she bipolar?
Yes. So my mom was bipolar. She had borderline personality disorder, and she also had what's called schizoaffective behaviors. She wasn't a true schizophrenic, but when she was having her mania, she presented in such a way because she would cycle so often. She would literally change ways and personalities. So
Yeah.
I would always study her and watch her as a young girl because I lived in the unknown. I never knew what was going to happen next. And I would watch her very carefully to see what her behaviors were, how she was changing, what she was doing. And it was very difficult and it was very scary. But yeah, she really struggled with her mental health, and she really, she was a very good-hearted, loving person, but unfortunately her illness took over and it really robbed her of so many things in life, and it robbed me of my mother. And
Yeah.
that's a sad thing to say, but it is the truth. Her mental illness was so difficult that it robbed us all of many things.
Your mother and my mom's mother, my grandmother, she was mentally ill too, because I remember my mother talking about it an awful lot to me and my brothers and sisters and stuff, and along the lines. Yeah, and your father was not the type that, he's going to go somewhere, even if they had it. I guess I could be wrong, Lisa. So forgive me, but your father struck me in the book as someone who he wouldn't have gone for any kind of help to understand your mother anyway, even if it had been available to him. Am I wrong?
Well, you're not wrong, but it's a bigger picture than that. So my dad,
Okay.
of course, when you again growing up in that era, the husband, the wife, the picket fence, the whole nine, they had this
Yeah.
beautiful image of what their life was going to be like, and no one expects mental illness to pop up. And my mother always did struggle. But my dad was a very tough Italian man and very much like, we're doing this. This is what's happening moving forward. He didn't understand mental illness. And then not just him, nobody really understood it. And I think for him, it was just so very hard for him to wrap his head around the fact that she couldn't get better. She couldn't get healthy. And he did stick by her side for a while. And after my brother passed away, that's when things really unraveled. That's when he just couldn't handle losing his son and losing his wife, because he did lose his wife. My mother was never the same ever again. And it separated the family. And at one point he did leave, and he just couldn't handle being there anymore. And unfortunately, he left me there. And
Mm.
that was the biggest part and the biggest challenge, honestly, for me growing up, is like knowing my dad did walk away and he didn't take me with him. And I
Uh,
struggled with those abandonment issues for years. I mean, him and I had those conversations as when I became an adult, and we did
yeah.
work through a lot of that stuff. But at that time, in that time frame, again, nobody understood it. Very hard to wrap your head around it. And there was no resources. And that's
Yeah.
another thing. There was very limited resources. And I think I told you this before, but therapy was done in the home. So people would come into the house. This is an interesting story. People would come into the house. The therapist would come in, her bag full of pills. No lie. Everyone got their pills. They sat in a circle and did group therapy right in my home. I'm a young girl. Now I'm not only listening to my mother and her issues, now I'm hearing all these other people and their issues. And It's interesting with the woman who the therapist did say to my mother and once to my dad, I really believe your daughter needs some help working through things because of my mother's struggles and losing my brother. And my father's words to her were, you're here to help my wife. You do not talk to my daughter.
Ooh,
And
ooh,
that's the truth. And that's the only time I can tell you that somebody really reached out and said, I see this child is struggling. Can we do something to help her? Other than that, nobody, everyone stayed in the background and nobody wanted to look at it. Nobody wanted, again, like you said, nobody wants to deal with it. So it
yeah.
is unfortunate, but that really was the sign of the times. And moving forward to today, I'm still seeing those things are happening, that people don't step up. People are not telling what they see or what they know. And unfortunately, the end result is a child does get abused. And even worse, children are dying because nobody is stepping up. People need to step up and speak up when they see things.
Now, your father remarried, correct?
Yes, yeah, my dad remarried and I had
And
two sisters.
okay, when things really got interesting is when I believe your mother died eventually. Am I correct? And at the funeral, your stepmother and your two sisters said that they were going to be there for you. And did that occur? Did were they have they been there for you since that situation, or was
Since
that
my
just something said at the moment?
No, no, yes, they have. They have. But when my mom passed in 2014, my dad passed first. My
Oh,
dad
okay.
passed in 2010, and my mom passed in 2014. And my stepmom and sisters, yes, I mean they have been supportive in regards to all of that. And I have to be honest, like my stepmom never had any ill will towards my mother, and my mother was like again very very verbally abusive, but my stepmother never had any ill will. She understood that she was a sick woman, and she kind of like removed herself from it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
and even as time went on and life went on, my dad still struggled tremendously when it came in regards to speaking about my mother or talking about my mother. As he got older, I saw that he did have empathy for her, and that was something, I think he realized more getting older that, how sick she truly, was and how long it went on for. But it's interesting how all that unfolds in life as
Yeah.
we learn, as we grow. And it is what it is. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's a really bad
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it is. But the good part about all this, my friend Lisa, you're sitting in front of me here on camera. You're happily married, at least you better be, and
I
you have a couple of children. You have a handsome husband who I really want to. I still have friends in Vegas.
am.
Anyway, and you have a happy life. You still probably have those moments when things you recall. But what advice can you give to you're a survivor, and I remember the words you gave to me once before that sometimes abusers, uh, uh, people who've been abused become abusers. Is that statistic still rising? Is that and is it because of the world we currently live in, the stresses of the day-to-day activities, what's going on, people working 2 and 3 jobs to survive? Is that still coming about, that the mental illness comes from the stress of the day's activities and the world we live in?
Well, it's a whole combination of things, but to go back to the beginning here, yes, the happily married, 39 years. We have
Yes.
3 grown children. We have 4 grandchildren, and my husband and I are raising 2 of those grandchildren. So our life is full and it's busy. We're very blessed and very lucky to have all this goodness. And I feel like for myself, everything I went through was so difficult and so hard. And I believe that these are gifts that
Yeah.
were given to me. And I am living a full life. And I have done the work to overcome and heal. And it was very hard to do so. Healing comes in stages. And the best advice I can give to somebody who is out there struggling is to do the work. Take the time, do the work, go to therapy, start at the beginning and take it little pieces at a time. I always say go back to the childhood. That's where you need
Mhm.
to begin and take it piece by piece and work through those things. And when you're tired, you rest. If it becomes too much, you take a step back. Allow yourself to absorb what you're dealing with. Allow yourself to validate what you're feeling and saying those words out loud, hearing your voice say those words, it validates all that you've been through. And then when
Yeah.
you look at, again, like you said, statistics, are things rising, like with abusers, people who are abused becoming abusers? Yes. Yes, because there's so many broken people out there who haven't done the self-work and the self-care, and they use other avenues to suppress it. People use drugs, they use alcohol, all those different things, and they engage in risky behaviors, anything to shut off what happened to them. And that's
Yeah.
unfortunate because a lot of times the abused person ends up being an abuser in some way, shape, or form. It could be the physical, the mental, the sexual, all of it. I mean, it could be just a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But the piece there, the big piece there is that if someone who's been abused needs to work on the trauma. They need to work on how
Hmm.
they're going to work through it and get over. I don't say get over it, but get move forward from it, because you don't fully ever get over it. You find a way to put it in its place. You find a way to take back the control. You are in control of it, and you can handle what you need to handle as it comes forward. But that again takes a lot of work. Therapy is very important. People do,
Where
I was going to say people don't always want to do therapy, but I have to be very honest. Therapy saved my life.
where can people go? I know if you live in New England or something, there are places where you in your local neighborhood. But where can people throughout the United States or wherever? Where can they go? Who can they call?
So of course, like there's the help hotline, the 988 suicide prevention hotline, that's connected to mental health as well. If you are really struggling and you feel like there's no way out in the moment, dial 988. You can text it on your phone. There's someone there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that can help you find
Hmm.
something locally that's, a program, or, someone you could speak with that can help you work through your issues and problems. But what I
Hmm.
always tell people is look in your local area. Look for mental health, associations. You can even tap into hospitals and doctor's offices and those different things. They have lists of different programs and in your area. And that's what I always tell people. Always find what's in your local area and start there. Make the phone calls and move forward from there. And you will find someone that will help you. And don't give up. If you feel like someone is not giving you the proper help and support, keep pushing forward, keep making calls, keep asking the questions, because you are worth it. You are worthy of help. You are worthy of good things in life. You're worthy of healing. So
Hmm.
that is the advice I give to people. Really know what's in your area and tap into those things. Bless you.
Yeah. Thank you. Some of the things you were saying about getting help, and when I ask you the question, is because gentlemen of my generation, we went through Vietnam, and when we came home, um, the military would give you about 30 seconds of their time with some mental health issues and dealing with PTSD. Now, I never really suffered from that too much. I was very fortunate. I was in the Air Force, so I flew, but I did get shot down a couple of times. And to be perfectly honest with you, I was left with some nightmares when I think about Memorial Day and I think about Veterans Day and the anniversary coming up here of the United States Army. And I think of members of my family. My dad suffered from it. I know that. He never sought out any help at all. Of course, back in the 40s and 50s, nobody did.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but is there something that two words kind of come to me: emotional hardness? Do people become emotionally hardened and okay, that's my life, that's the cards I've been dealt, that's it, okay, fine, I'm moving on with my life, and I don't need your help, I don't want to hear your help, I don't want to talk about. And by the way, that doesn't mean that, because I hear that from people that have college degrees, PhDs. Nah, I don't need to. I don't need to talk
Yeah.
about that. I don't need to. I don't know. Because it's like I don't talk about religion and I don't talk about politics. It's like, well, I don't talk about my mental health issues, and that's the most important thing, because
True.
when people go through abuse, Lisa, and you know this, what's the one organ of the body that gets screwed up so fast? It's right here.
Well, sure,
It's,
because the brain
it's right
goes on,
here.
yeah, it goes on overload. The brain, and I call them misfires, especially for children. When children are witnessing trauma and abuse and violence, their brain goes into that fight or flight mode. And the brain like freezes in a sense. And these are definitely, things that come directly from abuse. And it's just like in combat, in war, you're seeing these things, this traumatic stuff, and it shocks the brain, it shocks the body, it shocks the nervous system. And then when it's over, your body absorbs it all and holds on to it. I always say the body keeps score, and that's the truth, because the body holds on to everything. And it's a shame to think that so many people walk around and they are desensitized. They have detached themselves from the abuse. And that's part of the trauma. The brain it detaches from those emotions, it detaches from those feelings. It's another way that the body is trying to protect you from all of that. But the unfortunate piece there is the longer you go being desensitized and being detached, the harder it is to work through what you need to work through. And believe me, when I say that, I don't say it lightly, because healing is messy. Healing is a traumatic experience in itself, because you're reliving everything you went through. It's not an easy road. That's why I always say take it in small doses. But the exciting news about that is that you can heal. You can heal your brain. You can heal your body. You can live a full life beyond the abuse. It's just that it does take time. And I think sometimes people think, okay, I went to therapy for a little bit, I'm saved, I'm done, it's all good, I'm cured. And that's not how it works. That is not how it works, because healing comes in many, many stages. I'm still healing. I've done the work. Let me tell you, I've done years of work. I've done therapy a few different times. My writing, all the work that I do now, the speaking and all of it, those are all parts of healing. And now giving back, working as a CASA advocate for children. I work with NASCA, the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, and I'm always tapping into those things. Those are all parts of healing, because you're taking all of your pain and you're making, good purpose out of it. And that's really, the way to move forward and heal. I'm not telling everybody to go out and write a book, but what I'm saying is take the time to look at the things that, are scary to face, and work through it to save yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to Lisa Zarcone, and she is the author of The Unspoken Truth, a memoir. She was abused as a child. She's abused as a survivor, and as she just stated, she helps the children. She's an advocate for children in the Massachusetts area, and I presume you're probably called upon not only just outside of Massachusetts, but some other areas as well. And she's a keynote speaker. And if you want to get in touch with her, her website is always at the bottom of the screen during this interview. Are there some people that are born? I asked you this question once before. Are there some people that are born that the electronics up here are just wired in such a way there is nothing on God's green earth that's ever going to stop them from being abusers, sadistic people, murderers, whatever the case may be? Are there just some people that are wired, and by the time they're 9 or 10 years old, these kids they're beyond help. They belong in a mental institution.
Yes. So that's really a good question. And I'm going to tap into my sexual abuser. My sexual abuser, I was 12 going on 13 at the time. He was a 15-year-old young man. He was severely mentally ill. I believe born that way when you talk about the wiring piece. He was also abused by his family members. He was abused. His dad was an alcoholic. His mom abused him, I believe, sexually. And he was a very damaged young man from a very early age. So think about a child who has mental health issues, say from the get-go, right from the beginning. Right. Now add in trauma, abuse, dysfunctional environment. That child is already lost by the age of 5 years old, already, damaged. And if nobody's helping that child and they're continuing to be abused, so there's a point of no return. And I believe with my sexual abuser, he was at the point of no return, because when he abused me, it wasn't just sexual abuse. It was physical abuse. It was emotional abuse. It was satanic. He would tap into satanic things and recite things and scream things. And he was so bizarre and scary. And I'm going to use the word crazy, because he was. And the sad piece is that he went on to abuse many people. He went on to abuse his wife, his, I think, second wife, his children. I had his daughter reached out to me, and he passed away. He committed suicide. And she reached out to me because she read my book and she asked me, "Is the man in your book my father?" I was floored. And I have to be honest, it took me like 3 days to answer this woman. She emailed me. And then I
Yeah.
thought to myself, first of all, it's not her fault. Her father was so sick. Second of all, she needs something from me. She needs something from me so she can heal. So I made the choice to respond to her, and we did have a conversation. And she did tell me how seriously abusive he was to everybody. And the hard part for me to hear was that a lot of the things he did to me, he did the exact same patterns along the way to them. The satanic stuff, saying his name was this different person when he changed into this person, and the abuse, the physical, the mental, all of his children were abused. And think about that. That's a whole nother generation of people who were abused. He left his mark on society in a very negative and evil way. And
Yeah.
that's sad. So when you talk about somebody who was born not right, born ill, I'm going to say yes, my sexual abuser was born ill, and then everything around him just brought him to the next level. And that is how you find people out in the world who murder, who rape, who do all these things. They were children who have been through things. They're
Yeah.
children who were pushed to the point of no return. And when they're pushed to that point, everything and anything can happen.
Yeah. I lived in Los Angeles, as you know, for a number of years, and I used to hear this crazy stigma, and even my sister, who's a psychiatrist, used to say, yes, there was a stigma with adult performers in the adult industry, that they were sexually abused, that they were this, they were that. Of the three or four, and actually I knew more than that. Shame on me, but
Yeah.
I knew more than that. And most of those women were not sexually abused. They were not raped by Uncle Jim or Uncle Bob or anybody. They just went to Los Angeles to become actors. They found out they're not going to make it in the legit theater, but they beautiful and they could make money and they enjoyed sex. So that stigma needs to be removed.
Yes, to a point, because I do believe there are people that do make those choices, but I also believe that a lot of not just women, but men as well, their true backstories are riddled with abuse,
Oh
riddled,
yeah.
riddled with a home life filled with abuse. Maybe not all of them were sexually abused, but I guarantee you, if you like learn more about how they grew up and what they were surrounded by,
Hmm.
there was abuse. There's a lot of people, who have been abused and then go on to do things. When you talk about, like, okay, the movies, you have, what about strip clubs, escort services, all those things, and some people do it, like you said, for the money, for
Hmm.
this is what we're doing. But there's many, many, many people who have been through such horrific things, and this is the only way they I think they feel that they can
Yeah.
survive, is by doing
Yeah.
these things. And that's a shame, because that shows that a lot of people have low self-esteem, and they don't
That was
feel,
another subject. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Low
they don't
self
feel
esteem.
worthy, and they don't feel worthy of good things because they've been abused for so long that they just go to a different level of being abused on a different stage. And
You know
that's
that I had a friend of mine who went through some mental abuse growing up as a kid, and you know how he combated it? He became a success, married, uh, two children, or was it three? I can't remember. Anyway, grandchildren, and he's highly successful. He's retired now. He's happy as can be, and he didn't let it get to him. He just said, "My revenge, or any revenge on anybody that does anything to you, is to be successful. Show them, yeah, I can do that. You said I couldn't do this, I can do that." Um,
But
one
then
of the
what
questions.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you before we move forward. In that
Go ahead.
scenario, there are people that take their, what they've been through in that abuse, and they shift gears to that level. And I did
Mhm.
the same as a young adult. As a teenager, I said, I need to be successful. I need to get out of this situation. I need to put my head in the game and do what I had to do. and I pushed hard. I worked 3 jobs in high school, graduated with honors, and went to college.
Wow. Where'd you go
But
to college?
I went to Stone College in New Haven. It's a secretarial business college. And
Ah,
it really wasn't even the career that I wanted because I really wanted to be an artist, but I knew that I needed to get a career going as quick as possible so I can get out of my home. I can
yeah.
move forward with my life. So there are people that do that. They take their abuse honestly and they put it on the back shelf and say, this is what happened. I'm moving forward, living my life. But I can guarantee you it's always there. There's
Yeah.
always those pings of the past that come forward, and certain things will trigger it. And you can have certain quirks that just come with it. It's all part of that. But there's some people that are not, I don't want to say strong enough. Some people I think, are so beaten down that they
Hmm.
don't know how to get themselves out of it. And if they're not getting the proper help and support, they stay stuck and they stay stuck in the abuse.
Two subjects I want to cover here in the next 10, 15 minutes. We're talking to Lisa Scone. She's my dear friend. She used to join me on my late night show from time to time. And she's a great person. She's the author of The Unspoken Truth, a memoir about being abused as a child. And now she's a child advocate. And yes, and don't forget, Main Street is on dbtv.tv Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. out of Philadelphia. And we're streaming worldwide. And thank you all for paying attention to the show. We're doing great in the numbers department, and I appreciate that very, very much. How Number one, how did the pandemic affect young people as well as older people? I mean, we were shut in for like a year and a half, 2 years. And then I want to get into some of the cases you've seen as a child advocate, some of the hard, terrible cases that you've seen. So let's hit the COVID thing first and
Yes.
talk about how has that affected people even to this day?
COVID really did a number on everybody, young and old. Different ways for different people. When you start out with the young, so the children who were stuck home, they were doing online schooling. There was no avenue for them to socialize. So now you have these kids who are stuck home, stuck doing everything online, now so connected to social media because that was their only outlet. Now their brains have shifted to connected to the electronics, the like you said, the social media stuff, and having a hard time socializing normally. The anxiety, the children up and coming now are all riddled with anxiety, social
Mhm.
awkwardness, trying to figure it all out because they lost that big piece. As young kids, if you remember as a kid, you went to school, you chatted with people, you hung out, you ran around, you had a good time, you
Mhm.
socialized, you weren't being bombarded with the internet and news and
No.
all of this heaviness. So for the young kids, it really has put a big anxiety and social awkwardness in their path that they're trying to overcome. I saw it with my own grandchildren. My granddaughter was in 7th grade at the time,
Mhm.
sixth and 7th grade, and those were those pivotal years where kids really learn how to socialize. And
Mhm.
she struggled tremendously. First of all, being online, feeling like the camera's on her, and then going back into the classroom and being overwhelmed with so many people around. So that is what the youth are dealing with. You saw suicide rates went sky high.
Yeah.
Suicide rates have continued to climb. And I believe a lot of that does come back to the pandemic when you have adults who weren't able to work, make money. Now you have the money stressors, the family stressors. That brought in a whole realm of child neglect and child abuse. Those numbers rose. Child deaths have risen, all because people were stuck in the home, couldn't do what they needed to do. And then the elderly were terrified of all of these things. And with older people, they watch the news like all day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their brains are so overloaded with the negativity that they feel hopelessness. So many people have felt hopelessness that we're never going to get out of it. It's never going to change. We're all going to like die. And it was such a huge impact on everyone. And now that life is busy once again, and of course we're all on that fast mainstream move, which is not even, it's not healthy either because it's too fast. So you had
Right.
You went from fast to nothing to fast in the speed of light. And the brain cannot keep up with all of that. It's shocking. It's shocking to the body, shocking to the brain. And we're still seeing the effects now. What is it, 2 years later, right?
Right.
Two
Well, actually,
oh, yeah, 2 years later,
it
right?
was 2020 when it
2020.
hit.
Well, yes, and we had 2020 to like 2021 was all that. So yeah, so
Yeah.
you're saying 4 years later, we're still seeing the effects of that, and we're still seeing again the suicide rates have climbed because people still feel that hopelessness. They still feel that isolation, and that's things that we need to work on. And that's when you talk about mental health. It's
Mhm.
still a huge stigma. People don't want to talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it. They're embarrassed to talk about it. But we need to talk about it. We need to break those barriers and talk about it, because that's the only way that things will change, is if we talk about it, make safe spaces for people to speak about it and be accepting of it.
That's why I really don't like when I meet people that say, "Well, why I homeschool my child." I go, "Why?
Yeah,
What are you afraid of?" And it generally boils down to they're afraid of something that the kid may learn in school that they don't want them to learn. We live in a
right,
society, and I hate to say this, where, oh, I don't want my kids to know anything about Muslims. I don't
right.
want my kids to know anything about this or that. And here where I live is a extremely conservative area of the country, here in Brevard County, which is right near the Cape.
Yeah,
Um, it's extremely conservative. And these people, you talk to them, and you say, well, why don't you want your son or daughter to learn about Islam, just so they have an idea of what it is, so they can come up with their own? They don't need to learn about that. Well, do you take your children to church? No, they don't need to learn about that. Everything they need to know, I'm going to tell them. I say, well, do you have a college degree? No, I don't. I barely got out of high school. I said, so how can you teach your children anything if you don't know anything? And they
right,
look at me and they go, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm nobody, but I'm just a person that if I had children, and I do not,
right.
I would certainly want them to have a well-rounded education. The conservatives keep coming up with, well, we got to get rid of these liberal colleges. You know what? Those liberal colleges teach to students how to get along with everybody in the world.
And it's true. It teaches diversity. It teaches acceptance. All of those things that are so very important. I have to be honest. When I think of children growing up, being raised in this society now, because listen, we raised our 3 kids. Now we're raising our grandchildren in this whole new world. And I always go back to the old school main values and structure in the home. Kids they need boundaries, they need structure, they need support. They need to have a concrete, routine. All of those things. They need to be taught morals and values. And,
Yes.
and being kind and accepting of all different people, of different race, color, creed, all of it. People, being good to people and learning about different culture is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And,
Yeah.
and you want your children to understand these things. So my husband and I have had to evolve with the times because of all the social media things and all that. But at the same time, we still are raising our kids the way our grandchildren, the way we raised our own kids, with
Yeah.
those supports in place and with that structure and love. And that really molds children to be more open and understanding of different things, kinder, respectful. Respect is a huge factor. Always teach about respect, because you see a lot of youth today who speak to adults like they're garbage. They don't have
Right.
the respect. Open a door for somebody, help someone out if they drop something. Simple little things that you teach your children that stick with them through adulthood, and then that
Yeah.
piece grows. So you're right. It can't be like blinders on and put your kids in a box and think that you're going to send them out into the world one day. It's all going to be grand. No,
Yeah.
you're going to put them in such culture shock. They're not even going to know how to handle anything. And
Yeah.
that's
Tommy, put that picture up there again of Lisa with her book. Lisa Zarcone is my guest for this first hour. She'll be back with us another hour. There it is. You can get the book. Look on lisazarcone.net, and you'll be able to find out all the information about her. And that'll be exciting. And the name of the book is The Unspoken Truth, a memoir about someone who was abused as a child and is now as a childhood advocate. We got about 10 minutes left in the program here today. Lisa, talk about a couple of the cases that you've seen that horrified you, that was like shocking beyond shock. of all the stuff you have seen, because you have seen it come and going since you have been a childhood activist?
Yes, I mean, every case is hard because you have a child who's been abused, and there's different things that you see. You see children that are living in poverty with extreme neglect and living in such an unsafe environment, and then you
Yeah.
have the parents who are they're lost. They're lost in their own, world, and it's a generational piece. So you have children in that regards. Then you have children who are being physically abused and they are living in violent households, and children are being taken out of their homes. Of course, here in Massachusetts there is DCF, child services, that will come in and take a child, if they are, suspected of abuse. But
Yes.
there, some things are very extreme where children, of course, I mean, I hate to say these things, locked in rooms, beaten with objects, all those types of things are real. Those are the realities. And then you have other children like myself. When it started out, it was mental abuse, kids who are being abused emotionally and mentally by an unfit parent, and that unfit parent has either drug or alcohol addiction, mental health disorders, and if they're not getting the proper help and support that they need, who's helping the child? And
Yeah.
that's how people fall through the cracks. So I have seen a little bit of everything. And on that note, I'm going to tap into that story that's going on right now with Travis Decker. He is a vet who has 3 children, and he murdered his 3 children. It's all over the news. He took them for a visit,
Yeah.
and he murdered them, and he's on the run. Now let's look at the bigger picture of that. He was struggling with his mental health, severely struggling with his mental health. The court said, yes, he can have his visits. He can take his children out. The mom knew he was struggling. She was afraid to say no to him because
Mm.
he would become violent. She had people calling her from his work saying he's been unstable. She still allowed the children to go that day, unfortunately. Because of all these things, she felt no help and support. He's not getting the help and support. He did something, again, the point of no return. He was not helped properly. And unfortunately, this is what happened. And we lost 3 beautiful babies. These
Yeah.
stories do happen. We're hearing them all over the news. Now, locally here, Harmony, Montgomery, Massachusetts, this little girl was placed with her father. The courts placed her with her father. Her father was a drug dealer, a drug addict with violent temper. He was in jail,
Right.
a felon, and the judge said, yes, he can take her. And not only did he take her, he took her to another state, now across state lines from
Mm.
Massachusetts to New Hampshire, where he severely abused her. She got lost in the shuffle between states. They didn't track her properly. First of all, this child should have never been given to the father with his criminal abusive behaviors. And
What did Lisa? Let me interrupt you real quick. What does the judge say about this when they present it to him? You blew it, Judge.
yes, well, what they're investigating now, because this father ended up murdering her.
Oh God.
Punched her in the face so hard he broke her neck. And it's a
Oh,
horrendous story. And then he drove around. He drove around with her body in a bag for months
oh
before he
my God.
disposed of her body. They still don't know where she is. It's such a disturbing and sad story. Again, fell through the cracks. So many people saw things, didn't say anything. Family members came forward after the fact. DCF didn't even check on this child for over a year. They didn't even know she was missing. This is a horrendous story. But the saddest piece to that, besides this poor child going through what she went through, is the
Mm.
fact that nobody stepped up or spoke about what was going on until she was gone. So
How often do you see that? How often do you see that where they just look the other way?
when they look the other way, I feel like the system is so overloaded that they can't keep up. That they need to get a handle on it. And children are being preyed upon everywhere. They're being preyed upon in their own home. They're being preyed upon in some foster homes. Not all foster homes are safe. So that it goes bigger and bigger and bigger. But the bottom line to all of this is this age-old saying: see something, Say something. Do not be afraid to ask the questions because you may be saving a child's life.
Yeah.
So very important. If you're seeing abuse happen, don't turn the other way. Speak up. Do what you have to do to save that child. You see, many children die because people are not stepping up and the system is flawed. It's a lot of things in one. But yes, we do see all these different scenarios that do take place, and it's
Yeah.
very sad.
It's
So
it's like it's like a nursing home where my dad was before he died. The people who work there are not qualified to work there. They're underpaid. They're overworked, and they don't have the patience. They don't have the education to deal with this kind of situation. And I have a feeling people who work in DCF or even here in Florida, wherever, they're not qualified. They don't know what they're looking for. They're overworked.
yeah,
It's you
I think
know
it comes down to being honestly overworked. I think their caseloads are so massive. They're stretched so thin. They're trying to go here, there, and everywhere. Do I believe everybody's qualified that's hired? Absolutely not. I've seen it. I've seen it on my own recognizance. I've seen it. I've seen it out there. There's people just like they're not doing the right things. They're not following the protocols. They're not doing what they need to do. And this is where the courts need to be stronger. The courts need to crack down on what's happening. And honestly, being a CASA advocate is just a little piece that I can do to speak for a child,
right.
to step in front of the judge and say, this is what I'm seeing. This is the information that I've gathered. This is my recommendation, what is best for this child. I have
Mhm.
a voice in the courtroom as a CASA advocate, and it's a very important voice because that can change a whole child's life.
Are your cases getting to be more often now than they were when you first started? More often, more on a weekly basis
Oh,
than it
there's
was before?
Oh, it's through the roof. It's through the roof. There's not enough CASA advocates for children. There's not enough to take in because the quantity of children is so high. And CASA advocates are in every state. They're worldwide, and you go from state to state. In some states, child abuse is not reported as much. Maybe it's not as prominent. And in other states, it's way out there, high end, and they cannot keep up with the caseloads. And this
Mhm.
is the truth. There's just so many children in need out there. There's so many families in need. Because also as a CASA advocate, we're there to help the family as well. If we can help the family and put good supports in place to help them overcome that circle that they're stuck in,
Yeah.
it's a positive for everybody. Nobody wants to take a child from somebody and be like, oh, you're not fit. Here goes the child. But at the same time, you have to be realistic about if this child is in an unsafe situation, that child does need to be removed. And it's very hard. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy job because you're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with families. You see the other side of things. How did the family fall apart? How did the abuse start? Why is this not happening? And then you have to work through all those things. So it's really a complicated job, but the work is important. Every time we
Yeah.
speak for a child, it's very important.
Absolutely. And Lisa, we've run out of time. And this is part one. There's going to be part two. We've already got that taken care of. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Main Street, Lisa. I'm going to call you in just a couple of minutes on the phone
Okay.
at home, and we'll talk. And I want to thank all of you out there very much for taking the time to join us here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Going to take a week off. I got some work to do. Got a special show coming up for July 4th. Next time that I come on, we have the Untouchable Tours from Chicago, a company that I worked for when I was living in Chicago. But until then, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and please, if you see something, report it. Children and adults need our help, from childhood to the elderly. We need to be there for each other. Until then, take care for now. Bye-bye.